The prologue of John opens with a majestic description of God's Word as present at the very beginning and in fact being the agent of creation. In the beginning was the Word, Logos in Greek, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was in the beginning with God. All things were made through it, and without it was not anything made that was made. In it was life, and the life was the light of man. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Notice that I follow German and other translations of John, where with regard to God's Word, the neutral pronoun it is used, against the practice of most English translations voting for he or him. A number of suggestions have been raised concerning possible influence here of variegated traditions of broader currency. For example, philosophical and quasi-gnostic elaborations were mentioned in this context. The philosophers traditionally propagated the notion of creation as mediated by God's idea or thought, another possible translation of the Greek word logos used in the prologue. Gnostics, on the other hand, showed great interest in a complex and multi-layered process of creation with a number of intermediary divine agents involved. However, even if such trends could exercise some backdrop influence, the salient elements of the passage, in the beginning, the word saying, the word God mentioned 4 times, light, darkness, and the faithful distinction between them, all clearly indicate that the passage converses with the first lines of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. One notes that by late Second Temple times, Jewish tradition had developed quite a few ideas concerning agents of creation, on which the prologue could have been relying. Already in the late biblical book of Proverbs, it is God's wisdom which is presented as God's go-in-between. I read from Proverbs chapter 8. Does not wisdom call? To you, O man, I call, and my cry is to the sons of men. I skip to verse 23. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. I skip to verse 27. When He, God, established the heavens, I was there. When He drew a circle on the face of the deep, when He made firm the skies above, when He established the fountains of the deep, then I was beside Him, like a master workman, and I was daily His delight, rejoicing before Him always. If in Genesis chapter 1, God's omnipotence is stressed, He said and it was. In this reinterpretation, the book of Proverbs, the emphasis is on the wisdom of His deeds, accomplished in accordance with the harmonious design represented by wisdom. Wisdom, she or it, is the true beginning. Tenderly, this motif reappears in early 2nd century BCE book of Ben Sira, as well as in later rabbinic midrash, where wisdom is already identified with the Torah. Now it is a Judaized, so to say, version of wisdom, the Torah, which functions as both the record of revelation and the blueprint of creation. In addition to wisdom, the broader Jewish tradition also bears witness to the issue of the very term word, as in the prologue, as designating God's intermediary in creation. In Hellenistic Jewish thought, the outstanding example is Philo of Alexandria, for whom the word logos is everything, God's word from Genesis, God's thought, and God's wisdom. Philo interprets Genesis 1 as describing the formation or creation of the ideal blueprint of creation in God's thought. Chapter 2 of Genesis would then outline the actual creation through the action of the Logos, whom Philo calls Deuteros Theos, second deity, both representing God's plan and implementing it. This motif of the divine Logos seems to be reflected in John 1:1, and the Word was God. The appearance of the motif of God's Word as intermediary of creation is not limited to Jewish sources in Greek. It features prominently in the tradition of Aramaic paraphrase, Targum, which was read in synagogues and which incorporated many interpretations of the original Hebrew biblical text. One of the Targumic versions that reached us, so-called Targum Neophiti, combines the motifs of wisdom and word as go-betweens of creation. With regard to the word, the Targum understands the Genesis words "and God said" as indicating that the creation was accomplished by the word. The Aramaic word memra used here is the exact parallel of the Greek logos. I recommend you to read the article by Gary Anderson on the interpretation of Genesis 1:1 in the Targums, which discusses this thoroughly. Later rabbinic evidence is also telling. Tractate Avot of the Mishnah relies on the recurring phrase in Genesis 1, "and God said, and it came into being," to provide backing for its claim that by 10 sayings, Ma'amarot, did God create the world. This is sometimes accompanied by a disclaimer that in fact God could have done it with one saying only, with one Ma'amar in Hebrew. The term Ma'amar evoked here is the Hebrew parallel to the Aramaic Memra from the Targums.